Chapter 16 of the Hollow Tree Snowed-In Book. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Hollow Tree Snowed-In Book by Albert Bigelow Paine. Chapter 16 When Jack Rabbit Was a Little Boy. A story of a very long time ago. The little lady skips first on one foot and then on the other foot, around and around, until pretty soon she tumbles backward into 12 flower pots. That, of course, makes a great damage, and though the little lady herself isn't hurt to speak of, she is frightened very much and has to be comforted by everybody, including the storyteller, who comes last, and finishes up by telling about something that happened to Jack Rabbit when he was little. Once upon a time, it begins, when Mr. Jack Rabbit was quite small. His mother left him all alone one afternoon while she went across the wide grass lands to visit an old aunt of hers and take her some of the nice blackberries she had been putting up that morning. Mrs. Rabbit had been very busy all the forenoon, and little Jack had been watching her and making believe he was putting up berries too. And when Mrs. Rabbit got through, she had cleaned her stove and polished it as nice as could be. Then she gave little Jack Rabbit his dinner, with some of the berries that were left over, and afterward she washed his face and hands and found his blocks for him to play with, besides a new stick of red sealing wax, the kind she used to seal her cans with. For they did not have patent screw-top cans in those days, but always sealed the covers on with red sealing wax. Then Mrs. Rabbit told little Jack that he could play with his blocks, and build houses, with the red stick for a chimney, and to be a good boy until she came home. So little Jack Rabbit promised, and Mrs. Rabbit kissed him twice, and took her parasol and her reticule and a can of berries, and started. Little Jack would have gone with her, only it was too far. Well, after she had left, little Jack played with his blocks and built houses, and set the stick of sealing wax up for a brick chimney. And by he played he was canning fruit, and he wished he could have a little stove and little cans and a little stick of sealing wax, so he could really do it all just as she did. Then little Jack Rabbit looked at the nice polished stove and wondered how it would be to use that, and to build a little fire in it. Just a little fire, which would make everything seem a good deal more real, he thought, than his make-believe stove of blocks. And pretty soon little Jack opened the stove door and looked in, and when he stirred the ashes there were still a few live coals there. And when he put in some shavings they blazed up, and when he put in some pieces of old shingles and things they blazed up too, and when he put in some of Mrs. Rabbit's nice dry wood the stove got quite hot. Then little Jack Rabbit became somewhat frightened, for he had only meant to make a very small fire, and he thought this might turn into a big fire. Also, he remembered some things his mother had told him about playing with fire and about never going near a hot stove. He thought he'd better open the stove door a little to see if the fire was getting too big, but he was afraid to touch it with his fingers for fear of burning them. He had seen his mother use a stick or something to open the stove door when it was hot, so he picked up the first thing that came handy, which was the stick of sealing wax. But when he touched it to the hot door, the red stick sputtered a little and left a bright red spot on the stove door. Then little Jack forgot all about putting up blackberries, admiring that beautiful red spot on the shiny black stove, and thinking how nice it would be to make some more like it, which he thought would improve the looks of the stove a great deal. So then he touched it again in another place and made another spot, and in another place and made another spot, and in a lot of places and made a lot of spots. And he made some stripes, too, mostly, on top of the stove, which was nice and smooth to mark on, though he made some on the pipe. you would hardly have known it was the same stove when he got all through. And little Jack thought how beautiful it was, and how pleased his mother would be when she got home and saw it. But then right away he happened to think that perhaps she might not be so pleased after all. And the more he thought about it the more sure he was that she wouldn't like her nice red striped and spotted stove as well as a black one, and, besides, she had told him never to play with fire. And just at that moment Mrs. Rabbit herself stepped in the door. And when she looked at her red spotted and striped stove and then at Little Jack Rabbit, Little Jack knew perfectly well without her saying a single word that she wasn't at all pleased. So he began to cry very loud, and started to run, and tripped over his blocks and fell against a little stand table that had Mrs. Rabbit's work basket on it. For Mrs. Rabbit always knit or sewed while she was cooking anything, and all the spools and buttons and knitting work went tumbling, with Little Jack Rabbit right among them, hallooing, "Oh, I'm killed! I'm killed!" just sprawling there on the floor, afraid to get up, and expecting every minute his mother would do something awful. But Mrs. Rabbit just stood and looked at him over her spectacles and then at her red spotted and striped stove, and pretty soon she said, "Well, this is a lovely mess to come home to," which of course made Little Jack take on a good deal worse, and keep on bawling out that he was killed, until Mrs. Rabbit told him that he was making a good deal of noise for a dead man, and that if he'd get up and pick up all the things he'd upset maybe he'd come to life again. Then Little Jack Rabbit got up and ran to his mother and cried against her best dress and got some tears on it. And Mrs. Rabbit sat down in her rocker and looked at her stove and rocked him until he felt better. And by she changed her dress and went to cleaning her stove, while Little Jack picked up all the things, all the spools and buttons and needles and knitting work, every single thing. And after supper, when he said his prayers and went to bed, he promised never to disobey his mother again. End of chapter 16.